Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? When we picture the story of humanity, we often imagine ourselves as the ultimate survivors, the clever, inventive species that outlasted all others. But long before our ancestors fully ruled the earth, another branch of humanity walked beside us, the Neanderthals. And to call them ordinary would be a massive understatement. These people were absolute freaks of nature, tough, powerful, and built for survival in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. Neanderthals weren't the hunched, dim-witted cave dwellers pop culture once mocked. They were human different, yes, but human all the same, and their bodies told the story of raw strength. Compared to us, they were shorter, stockier, and far more muscular. Their rib cages were barrel-shaped, their bones thick, and their grip strength was off the charts. If you shook hands with a Neanderthal, you'd probably feel like a twig about to snap. These weren't delicate creatures, they were survival machines, built for the Ice Age. Their bodies were designed to conserve heat. Short limbs kept the cold from stealing too much warmth, while their wide noses helped humidify and warm the frozen air with every breath. Their muscles weren't for show, they were necessary tools for hauling, climbing, hunting, and surviving. A Neanderthal could likely outlift, outrun, and outlast most modern athletes without ever stepping into a gym. But their strength wasn't just physical. Their bodies carried the scars of countless battles with nature, broken bones that healed teeth worn down from years of chewing tough food, and injuries that spoke of dangerous hunts, and still they endured. The Ice Age threw every challenge imaginable at them, and they adapted, not with technology at first, but with sheer resilience. The truth is, Neanderthals were not simply different from us, they were extraordinary in ways we are only beginning to understand. So, we've seen that Neanderthals were absolute powerhouses physically, but what about their minds? For a long time, people assumed that Neanderthals were little more than beasts of brute strength, creatures who survived by instinct alone, but the truth uncovered by archaeology paints a far richer, more human picture. Neanderthals thought, felt, and created in ways that challenge our old stereotypes. First, let's talk about intelligence. Far from being mindless hunters, Neanderthals crafted tools with surprising skill. Their stone blades and scrapers weren't crude. They were carefully shaped, sharp, and effective. They controlled fire, not only for warmth but for cooking, which made food easier to digest and gave them more energy. In caves across Europe and the Middle East, we've found evidence of hearthplaces where Neanderthals gathered, shared meals, and told their own unrecorded stories under flickering firelight. And they weren't just surviving day by day, they were adapting with strategy. When they hunted, they planned. Massive animals like mammoths or bison weren't taken down by accident. These hunts required cooperation, coordination, and the kind of social bonds that only intelligent beings could maintain. A Neanderthal tribe wasn't just a group of bodies, it was a network of minds working together. But here's where things get even more fascinating. Emotion and culture. Neanderthals buried their dead. That fact alone tells us volumes. To bury someone is to care, to grieve, and to recognize that life has meaning even after it ends. Some burials even included flowers and objects, suggesting ritual, respect, or perhaps even belief in something beyond death. That's not brute instinct, that's humanity in one of its earliest and rawest forms. We also have evidence of art. Simple markings carved into stone, pigments used to decorate tools or bodies, and ornaments made from shells or animal bones show that Neanderthals weren't blind to beauty. They created symbols, and symbols are the foundations of culture. Imagine a world where survival was a daily battle, yet people still paused to decorate themselves or to leave marks on stone walls. That's more than survival, that's expression. So yes, Neanderthals were built like natural athletes, but inside those rugged skulls burned minds capable of thought, care, and creativity. They were not the dumb cousins of humanity, they were a different version of us. One that lived, dreamed, and loved in their own way. So, what was it actually like to live as a Neanderthal? When we peel back the layers of bone and stone, what we find is not a life of mindless wandering, but a rhythm of survival, community, and even small joys. Their days were tough, make no mistake, but they were also deeply human. A typical morning for a Neanderthal group might begin in the shelter of a cave or a simple structure built from wood and animal hides. Fires smoldered from the night before, filling the space with warmth and smoke that kept away pests. Children stirred first, their laughter echoing off the stone walls as adults prepared for the day's work. Life was communal. There were no isolated individuals, because in their world, survival depended on everyone playing a role. Hunting was the center of their existence, and it was no easy task. Imagine stalking a woolly mammoth or a bison across frozen plains, armed only with spears and courage. These hunts weren't random acts of desperation, they were carefully coordinated efforts. Strong adults worked together, surrounding or driving prey into traps, while others waited for the perfect moment to strike. It was dangerous. Injuries were common, but when the hunt succeeded, it provided enough food and materials to sustain the group for days, even weeks. Not every day was filled with high-stakes hunts. Many times, Neanderthals relied on gathering plants, fishing, or scavenging from carcasses left behind by other predators. Their diet was surprisingly varied, including nuts, berries, roots, and cooked meat. Around the fire, food wasn't just fuel, it was a moment of connection, where stories could be shared and bonds strengthened. Life also meant care. Archaeologists have discovered skeletons of Neanderthals who lived long despite severe injuries or disabilities, broken limbs, blindness, even loss of teeth. These individuals survived only because others looked after them, proof that Neanderthals practiced compassion. They weren't leaving the weak behind, they were carrying them forward. And then there were the quieter moments. Evidence suggests they may have decorated themselves with pigments, perhaps for rituals or social gatherings. Some scholars believe they sang, using their developed vocal tracts to create music around the fire. Others point to evidence of adornments made from shells or animal teeth, suggesting pride in personal appearance and identity. So, a Neanderthal's daily life was a blend of endurance and tenderness, long hunts, careful foraging, shared meals, and caring for one another. They lived close to nature's edge, yes, but within that harsh world, they carved out something deeply familiar to USA's sense of home, belonging, and meaning. At some point in their long history, Neanderthals came face to face with us Homo sapiens. It was a meeting that would reshape the destiny of both groups. Imagine the scene: two branches of humanity, separated for hundreds of thousands of years, suddenly staring into one another's eyes across a cold European plain. The question wasn't just survival anymore, it was coexistence, competition, and sometimes even connection. For years, the story was told as if it was simple. Modern humans arrived, smarter and better equipped, and wiped out the Neanderthals. But the truth is far more complex, and far more human. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens didn't just clash, they exchanged. Tools, ideas, and even genes passed between them. Yes, conflict happened, scarce resources and rival hunting grounds almost guaranteed that. But alongside battles, there were moments of cooperation, curiosity, and intimacy. Genetics tells us something astonishing. Modern humans outside of Africa carry Neanderthal DNA. That means interbreeding wasn't rare, it was part of the story. Neanderthals weren't just neighbors. In some ways, they became part of us. The legacy of those encounters lives on in traits like our immune systems, skin variations, and even the way our bodies react to cold. In other words, pieces of them still walk among us. But how did those encounters feel in the moment? Picture two groups meeting at the edge of a forest, both wary, both armed, both human in different ways. Did they see each other as monsters, or as kin? Perhaps both. To the Neanderthals, our ancestors must have looked strange, taller, slimmer, with different weapons and unfamiliar speech. To us, they must have seemed like living powerhouses, thicker and stronger than anyone we had ever known. Over time, as Homo sapiens spread further across Europe and Asia, Neanderthal populations shrank. Whether through competition, disease, or the sheer weight of changing climates, their numbers dwindled. Yet those encounters left an indelible mark on USM, just in our DNA, but in our very identity. The story of humanity isn't us versus them. It's a story of two branches that crossed paths, mingled, and, in a sense, became one. The last Neanderthals vanished around 40,000 years ago, but not completely. They live on in our bodies, in our memories, and in the questions they force us to ask about what it really means to be human. For thousands of years, Neanderthals thrived in environments that would have broken most of us in days. They endured glacial winters, hunted colossal beasts, and raised families in a world that seemed determined to erase them. And yet, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished. The question that lingers is why. For a long time, the explanation was simple and arrogant. We outsmarted them. The story went that Homo sapiens, with superior brains, weapons, and strategies, simply overwhelmed their primitive cousins. But as evidence mounts, that narrative crumbles. Neanderthals were intelligent, adaptive, and resourceful. So, their disappearance was likely not a single cause. but a perfect storm. Climate change played a brutal role. As Ice Age Europe oscillated between freezing cold and brief thaws, ecosystems shifted unpredictably. Prey animals migrated or died off, and food became harder to find. For small, scattered Neanderthal populations, each harsh winter was a gamble with death. Then there was us. Homo sapiens poured into Europe in waves, faster breeding, highly mobile, and carrying technologies that sometimes gave us an edge. Even without open war, competition for resources tilted the scales, and diseases, carried unknowingly by our species, may have ravaged Neanderthal groups that had no immunity. Yet perhaps the most poignant factor is this: they were never many to begin with. Estimates suggest that the global Neanderthal population might never have exceeded 100,000 at any given time. In such fragile numbers, a few unlucky years, failed hunts, epidemics, a string of brutal winters could push them past the point of recovery. Still, their disappearance was not an erasure. It was a transformation through interbreeding. A part of them survived not as a separate people, but as threads woven into the tapestry of modern humanity. They are gone, yet they are here, in our blood, in our bones, in the resilience that allowed us to inherit the world they helped shape. Their extinction, then, is not just a story of loss. It is a story of continuity, of how even in vanishing they became part of something greater. When the last Neanderthal took their final breath somewhere in Ice Age Europe, the world might have seemed unchanged. The winds still howled through frozen valleys, the mammoths still roamed, and our own ancestors continued their migrations. But something fundamental had shifted. A unique branch of humanity was gone, yet not entirely lost. Their legacy lingers in surprising ways. Physically, traces of Neanderthals live within us. Up to 2% of the DNA of known African populations today is Neanderthal in origin. These genetic gifts weren't trivial. They include traits that helped our ancestors survive in harsh climates, stronger immune responses, adaptations to cold, and even influences on skin and hair. When you stand against a winter wind and your body endures, you may owe thanks to a Neanderthal ancestor you'll never know by name. Culturally, they force us to reconsider what it means to be human. They buried their dead, cared for their sick, decorated themselves, and left behind tools and art. They weren't merely surviving, they were living with meaning. Every discovery from their world chips away at the false notion of human escapism, reminding us that we were never alone in our capacity for thought, emotion, and creativity. Perhaps the most enduring gift of the Neanderthals is perspective. They teach us humility. They show us that strength, intelligence, and adaptability do not guarantee eternity. They remind us that we, too, are just one branch of a vast evolutionary tree thriving for now, but not immune to the forces of change that once swept them away. Their story isn't one of failure. It's a testament to resilience, to how life can carve out brilliance, even in the harshest corners of Earth. And though they are gone, their echo walks with us, in our genes, in our shared history, and in the questions they still ask of us. As we come to the end of this journey into the world of the Neanderthals, let us pause and truly consider what their story means. Neanderthals were not failures. They were not a mistake of evolution. They were a testament to life's sheer resilience, beings who thrived in a merciless world, who loved, fought, and dreamed in ways we may never fully understand. And yet, they are gone. Their disappearance is a sobering reminder that no matter how strong, intelligent, or adaptable a species may be, survival is never guaranteed. Perhaps this is their greatest legacy, a mirror held up to our own existence. We like to believe that our cities, our technology, and our culture make us eternal, untouchable. But the Neanderthals remind us that permanence is an illusion. They teach us that humanity is not a fixed state, but a fragile moment in time. And yet, within that fragility lies something profoundly beautiful. The Neanderthals are not truly lost. They live on in our DNA, in the traces of their blood still flowing within us, in the lessons they left behind. They remind us to cherish what we have, to see our own lives, not as guaranteed, but as precious opportunities to create, to connect, and to leave something meaningful behind. So, the next time you look in the mirror, remember this: you carry a piece of them within you. And in that way, the Neanderthals never truly vanished. They became part of USA's silent legacy from a world of ice and stone, whispering through the millennia that we are not alone in the story of being human. And it leads us to one haunting question: if even the strongest of our kind can disappear, what legacy will we leave behind when our time inevitably comes?